The temporal lobe. The temporal lobe is heavily dedicated to helping process auditory information. That is because there are um, vibrations coming through the air that is being received by um, uh, fine hairs and by a system, a biological system called the ear, and it's receiving this information, and helping, it's detecting, uh, it's helping detect the how do you say the character of the sound and its location, and this is just raw data, like sound wave data, just coming in through into the auditory cortex for hearing. But the brain doesn't just need uh, sounds, it needs to understand the meaning of sounds, and that's why you have the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe is uh, is connected with sound because of how uh, how do you say, how it's just a core purpose of sound to how do you say, increase knowledge about, increase awareness about the environment, anything in the environment, to like whether a tobacco plant can make cigarettes. It's has to be like learned, and you cannot create the highest amounts of learning that the brain has capacity for is done through language. Language is created by sophisticated use of sounds in order to transmit the information that language could give. There are no other senses. The only other dominating sense that the person has is the eyes, and that is works very similarly in how do you say, it's like infrastructurally the way it's blueprinted and infrastructurally designed, that there is an organ that takes it, all of that raw data, the eyes, and it brings it back through the brain to another area where there's a greater um, organization of that data into ways that the brain can use. So the ears take it into the auditory cortex and help organize it in a temporal lobe to make it greater. And when you understand that no other sense could give you this sophisticated level of communication, then you understand, oh, uh, the ability to have sound is like, you know, uh, a core like of uh, the experience of existence. So um, then you have, that is auditory, temporal. Then you have the supplementary motor cortex and the premotor cortex and the motor cortex. The motor cortex is the one who is going to actually say jump, and the body's going to jump. The premotor cortex is going to say we want to jump, and it's going to tell the motor cortex, okay, now jump. And the supplementary cortex is even a forethought of that. It's the anticipation of jumping. And those sit in front of the parietal lobe, where we were feeling the muscles and the sense of body. Above the motor cortex now is the, oh, we forgot the occipital lobe. The aquapital lobe, so the eyes, we did kind of get it. The eyes take in the raw data of light and stream it back into the visual cortex, which is in the back of the brain. And then, uh, visual cortex, parietal lobes, visual cortex, parietal lobes, temporal lobes, auditory cortex, and motor cortexes, and uh, prefrontal lobe or frontal lobe. Frontal lobe is for executive planning, and they can never they don't know, they just know it's executive planning. And then frontal lobe, and then orbital cortex. um Not really, no. Yeah, it's a prefrontal prefrontal and frontal lobe. So the frontal lobe, so it's for executive planning. What it's really for is um the basic instinct drive is, or the brain knows that it's the brain knows that it's bad if it dies. If it dies, it doesn't get anything, and everything's over. So the brain knows that it should always live, and that's why we have survival instincts. Okay, so the brain is the brain has to keep the body always on. If the brain shuts the body off, we die. So um we need to go to sleep, because when you are operating in the daytime and expending energy, we have these uh, very stimulating hormones going through the body and stimulating. Okay, but um, these have an effect on the senses of the body. So the body has to regenerate itself. And when it does regenerate itself, then we can newly sense sensations again. When you spray a lot of, when there's a lot of odor in the air, the nose will pick up the odors, but then it starts to become insensitive. The chemoreceptors become sensitive. That's why you'll start to become insensitive to odors. It's a natural thing. Um, and it could occur very quickly. You know, you lose a sensitivity to it. Um, the more that the body is being stimulated and is not being regenerated because they're stimulating hormones, um, the less sensitivity you'll have. And the sensitivity is critical because we need it to survive. So the brain goes to sleep every night. Um, and when it goes to sleep, it has to know, don't die, you have to stay on. So that what it does is that the sleep drive engages. In order for the sleep drive to engage, it has to send a cascade of chemical hormones to constantly keep sleep mode engaged. And when those hormones run out, then the sleep drive disengages, and it has to, or you'll die. Um, so that's why, that's also, a reason for like nightmares and dreams that shake you awake, because your brain is engaging instincts and survival. Um, so you're in order to survive, you have to be able to anticipate. In order to anticipate, you have to be able to have senses, and you have no senses about something unless you have a memory of it, then you cannot anticipate danger. The brain has to know to anticipate danger, and the brain is constantly has to look for pleasure because pleasure is life, and I'll explain that. And it has to avoid pain because pain is very connected to death. And because of that, you have the frontal lobe with executive planning because you have to be able to think ahead a day, an hour, it doesn't matter, just uh, to have any peace, to know that you're safe, so that the body can relax, because there's nothing to worry about or there's no threats. Um, Um, and another fun thing about that is we said that there was the parietal lobe, which is telling all the tactile parts of the body, and the temporal lobe, which was kind of helping to organize all the auditory information, which was the highest level of knowledge that we could have. It's the only sense that creates that capacity. Um, when you overstimulate the temporal parietal junction, because remember parietal is body, you have out of body experiences. People say they have, when they have out of body experiences, maybe they had it when they were sleeping, maybe they were having like a lucid dream halfway between wake and sleep, and they felt, or they may have been like awake and just kind of like really out of it, and they're starting to feel like they were kind of disconnecting from their body. And the reason is because the temporal parietal junction is getting overstimulated by serotonin, which is a wakefulness hormone, which is basically, there's a sleepy hormone, which is melatonin, and there's a wakefulness hormone, which helps you feel very wakeful, which is serotonin. It creates the vividness, serotonin. And it's, there's why they say take melatonin to have vivid dreams, because serotonin and melatonin are inversely proportional and break down to each other. They have the same base. Um, so when that gets stimulated with a high level wakefulness, such as like if you are awake for a long period of time, you are sleep deprived, your body is building up a lot of the serotonin, or has a lot of serotonin and ATP, which are both, stimulatory and connected to each other chemically, that you'll have an out of body experience. And that's also why, if you want to lucid dream, which is where when your body wants to go to sleep, and you want to make sure that you kind of stay suspended where your brain is kind of in that half sleep wake state, so you can kind of like three first person role player drop down in your dream, and almost, it's like kind of a cool little experience called lucid dreaming. Is, if you want to do that, keep the light on, make sure you're sleep deprived, and you will have enough serotonin, and then pretty much every time you dream you'll be able to pop back up after a couple of seconds of having the visions, because your light's on, because you're able to keep a high level of serotonin. If the light goes off, that serotonin will start breaking down to melatonin because of the dark, and you won't be able to pull out of your lucid dream.